Right, good morning everyone, and welcome once again to Innovation Bay's Wednesday morning event series, coming live to you from my living room. I'm your host, Ian Gardner. I'm a co-founder at Innovation Bay and also a VC. I'm an investment partner at Gelix Ventures. Also call out to the rest of the Innovation Bay team. So we've got Faden Stow, my co-founder in Hobart, Shan Priest, our general manager, and Claire Tester, our event manager. So each week, Innovation Bay has been assembling a group of great guests, including VCs, we've had founders, and last week we had Malcolm Turnbull, that some of you may have seen. They've all shared their experiences coping with COVID-19 and our hopes for, what's going to emerge for the ecosystem on the other side of this, which will come. Thank you to everyone that's tuned in so far. If you missed any of the previous events, they are all on our YouTube channel, so check that out. In terms of Innovation Bay, if you're new, welcome. I know we've got some new people on here, and welcome back to our regulars. Innovation Bay is, I think, the longest running community for tech startups and investors in Australia. I've been around since 2003. We are here to support startups on their journey from idea to IPO and beyond, doing this through events, community, and content, all focused on helping people learn, connect, and grow. We recently announced, I don't know if you've seen it, but we announced a new research initiative called Startup Navigate, trying to get some data around what people are thinking and feeling right now is crucial. We've done this in collaboration with KPMG and AWS, a couple of our partners, and it's designed to capture the issues facing the startup ecosystem over the coming months. So over the next few months, there's going to be 6 times fortnightly surveys that will go out to founders and VCs to track the business and personal impacts of responses from this COVID-19 pandemic. It's still time to get involved. We've had a really good response, but we really want some more responses if we can. We will share all the data or the results with everyone once we've got it. So if you go to bit.ly.com/startup navigate, that would be fantastic. Big call out to our sponsors. We could not do this without them. So we really do want to say a big thank you to them and encourage you to check them out and use their services. AWS, IAG, Farmark Ventures, KPMG, High Growth Ventures, and Macquarie Bank. They are great supporters of Innovation Bay, and they do some incredible work supporting the startup ecosystem. So look, we're going to just about introduce our guests in a sec, and let me tell you about how this session will run. I'm taking a bit of a break today and handing the host duties to a buddy of ours, Alister Coleman. We were doing this format pre the pandemic, where we'd bring in the VCs and get them to talk to their portfolio companies, because it's quite an intimate relationship that most most investment relationships last longer than most marriages. So you do get to know each other pretty well. So we want to try and flesh that out, and we've been doing this a few times last year, and I think even early this year. So we want to do that again today. I'll introduce Al properly, but he's from Tempus Partners, so he's going to lead the conversation. So roughly 30 minutes or so, we'll chat to Eric and Manuri, and then I'll jump back on and ask the questions. So if you've got any questions for the audience, submit them through the Q&A function at the bottom of Zoom, or if you're on Twitter, use the hashtag online with IB. We've also got the chat function running, so please do keep that sensible. Now let's jump in and introduce Al and the guests. Can you all see and hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, awesome. So Al, I might introduce you first. You are the managing partner of Tempus Partners, Sydney-based VC firms that invest in visionary founders or the next generation of impossible. You've been in the podcast, which we do, so along with Hannah. So I had a chat. I think Hannah was one of the last interviews I did this year pre the shutdown. So that was awesome. How have you been coping with the lockdown?
We're doing great. The teams approach this really constructively. We went into isolation, I think, in the first week of March, so yeah, quite early on, and we're now in week 9.
And I think you said that you're quite enjoying it because you're a bit of a self-confessed introvert. Is that right?
We have 5 introverts in an 8-person team. So So I think it's not just me that's enjoying it. It's a few other people that have found it to be pretty productive, but it's not great from a team and collective and perspective. But
yeah.
But it's working okay.
All right. Well, let me just quickly introduce the couple of the portfolios. So we got Manuri Gunawardena.
Gunawardena.
Yes. I actually practiced that before I started, and I'm still managed to stuff it up. So Manuri, I'm sorry. Manuri, you're the founder of Healthmatch, connecting patients with clinical trials. So we'll get into that. Eric, you have a much simpler name. So Eric Peck, founder of medical drone delivery company Swoop Aero. Slight claim to fame, like you did pitch at our Innovation Bay founder dinner in Melbourne a couple of years ago. I don't think Al was there. Were you there, Al?
No.
That one? No, but maybe that was the catalyst that Eric needed to find you. So let's try and take some credit for that. So anyway, let me hand to you. I'm going to switch my video and audio off, and I'll jump back in 30 minutes. So over to you, Al.
Terrific. Thanks, Ian. It's really is an honour to be given the mic this morning and to share the stories of two really forward-thinking Aussie companies and their founders, and two companies that we've invested in. And also thanks to those who have joined this morning's session. We hope that you're well, that you're getting through lockdown, and hopefully we're all seeing the light at the end of the tunnel coming down. So, we're going to try and keep this nice and tight. For those of you that don't know Tempus, we're a Sydney-based venture capital firm, as Ian said. We back Aussie and New Zealand founders building software and advanced technology startups. We invest at seed stage, and our long-term investment approach allows us to back companies in categories that may appear conventionally impossible, but become profoundly probable with the combination of brilliant founders and technology's rapid advancement. And we'd like to share some of the stories of two founders who both are brilliant and also are really at the forefront of what they're doing in terms of technology. On the webinar today is Manuri Gunawardena of Healthmatch, as Ian said, and Eric Peck of Swoop Aero. And we're fortunate to have backed both Manuri and Eric, and Eric's co-founder Josh in their respective startups at a seed stage as their first VC investor. So that's something that we really look forward to doing with early stage companies. And we hope you enjoy the conversation with these two exceptional people. Perhaps Manuri, if we start with you, do you want to tell us a little bit more about Healthmatch and share with the viewers why you started the company and your ethos in building it?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks, Ian and Al, for having me. I guess to start off with, Healthmatch is a platform that matches patients to clinical trials. And the whole idea behind that is, as a patient, whether you have a chronic condition or cancer, it can be quite difficult to find and navigate the clinical trial space. And oftentimes it's dependent on which clinician you know or which hospital site you're visiting as to whether you get offered these options. And I guess given the current situation that everyone's facing, never has the importance of clinical trials being more contextualized. It's how we get new treatments to market. And so Healthmatch is built around facilitating, helping patients connect with these trials. And how I started the company, I guess, was a couple of years ago. I was in my final year of med school working in this space, and we were working on a brain cancer vaccine and trying to recruit patients for it. And we only got 2 patients in all of Australia onto this trial, which I found crazy given the context of the disease, and in hospital that I'd see families and patients looking for new treatments and new treatment options. So that was really the catalyst, and it's been great since we've launched. We've been able to match people to trials across 200 condition areas, and it really shows the importance of being able to give people these options.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we saw when we first looked at Healthmatch was that there were around 200,000 individual trials going on at any one point in time globally, which was a staggering number. I really didn't expect that. When you first stepped into the, into sort of exploring starting Healthmatch and building the company, were there any aspects to the scale or the size of the market that really took you aback and force you to think hard about how you were going to approach the business?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, clinical trials and drug development is a $120 billion market. And if you look at clinical trials specifically, recruitment is the biggest bottleneck when it comes to drug development. And surprisingly, 80% of clinical trials actually don't meet their recruitment numbers, which means that they either abandon and don't continue at all, or they're significantly delayed. And so when we looked at this market, we had to figure out the best approach to tackling it. And for us, that was, Australia is a small part of this market. It's only 4% of the global clinical trial market. But for us, it was a great testing ground. And we know, markets like the US and Asia, where there's a lot of clinical trials happening and fast growing drug development. We've planned out how we're going to tackle this, but one step at a time.
And the other thing, just before we step across to Eric, was just the surprising factor that I didn't realize at the time was that when you run a clinical trial, you need people who are not well and you need people who are healthy. And part of the challenge is recruiting enough people for the baseline data on both sides of that equation in order to be able to progress a clinical trial to test the veracity of the drug. Have you found as you built Healthmatch, trying to match this two-sided marketplace in effect, any challenges that really stood out to you initially, perhaps around the data or how you collected that information?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest challenge is it's not just matching a condition to a trial. These trials have really complex eligibility criteria, often, 30 or so specific data points that you need to match against the patient's profile. And that's where it gets complicated. As a patient, if you're trying to navigate, hundreds of trials for your condition area and these eligibility criteria individually, that's an extremely manual and complex process. So, our technology tackles this. We collect data in a very efficient, smart way, and we're able to then match patients through to these studies. And then interestingly, on the pharma side as well, not only can we provide them with patients that actually qualify and have been screened against their criteria, on a higher level, we can give them insights into where to focus their drug discovery efforts and clinical trial efforts.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. We're super excited about what the company has the potential to do, which is one of the primary reasons why we invested. Maybe Eric, changing gears, could you tell us about what Swoop does, how you started it with Josh, your backgrounds and how you got here?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Al. So we founded Swoop Aero in 2017 to transform the way the world moves essential supplies. And so I started my career as an Air Force pilot. I did a couple of tours in the Middle East, did an MBA, got into management consulting because I did think I wanted to be a management consultant as part of the MBA. Realized that wasn't for me and started sniffing around the startup ecosystem. Met my co-founder, Josh. Josh was a mechatronics engineer, so if you can imagine the big arms on production lines that build cars. He was like a leading programmer in getting those set up for an industrial automation company. And one of these guys that just kind of excels at everything they do. So he was like a cycling under 18 cycling championship. And when I met him, his latest phase was drone racing, and he was one of the best in the world. And we got posed this question by someone from the New South Wales Regional Health Department around, could a drone be used to move chemotherapy medication? And we kind of thought, yeah, well, that's possible. It can technically carry the weight over the distance between these couple of towns. But what does a system look like that enables you to do that safely, reliably and sustainably every day of the week? And we kind of looked at Josh's background, mechatronics engineer. I'm really interested in the field, and my background in aviation. I thought if we combine those two and build a drone delivery system, taking the lessons learned from real aviation and condensing it down into a small delivery aircraft, instead of trying to take a toy drone and build it up into a delivery drone, we could change the way we do it. And that's kind of what we've done. We operationalized in 2018 and won the first ever contract for medical drone delivery in Vanuatu. And since then, we've expanded to 2 operations in Malawi. We kicked off Mozambique and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It's been super exciting.
Yeah, I was quite taken aback when when we first started talking about what you wanted to do. And I think some of the feedback you got you got was that it was somewhat impossible to carry, 3 or 4 kilos over an extended 100-kilometer plus distance, to do that reliably, autonomously, and then deliver it on, effectively on a landing pad the size of a dinner plate. And so we talked about that over quite a long period of time, trying to understand, what the barriers were, and became evident to us your vision. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you solved those initial problems, and also maybe explain to the audience the fact that you actually build the drones and then you go and operate those drones as if it were, a service, a logistics service that, for contract?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the very early on, we identified that the real opportunity here was to build a product and deliver a service with it and have full control of that stack. Much like the Apple experience where you're kind of controlling everything you do. We wanted to be able to, buying something off the shelf just wasn't going to fulfill the needs of what we actually needed. And one of the very lucky opportunities we had was quite early on, we kind of reached out to the network and did a whole lot of customer meetings with, healthcare partners and logistics organizations. And we got this tender from Vanuatu. And what it did is it gave us a very specific set of product requirements to build to. And so by combining a lot of, domain experience across robotics and aviation and some actual requirements from a customer, we were able to build a very specific product that, people that otherwise been very focused on the technology and saying, okay, the drone can do all these very cool things, but we were actually just very focused on the customer problem, which was we need to be able to move a certain amount of product under cold chain conditions in a certain amount of time. And we believe this is the best way to do it. If we can give an organization access to the air, they can transform their health supply chain using this technology. So very early on, we just made a complete dedication to what the customer need was, and were largely agnostic to the cool factor of the technology and only built what was needed. And what that meant is we actually ended up with a very, very tight, controlled system that's not only the aircraft or the drone itself, but a whole lot of other components of that system, from online training packages through to ground infrastructure, through to platforms so customers and the public can see the aircraft moving around on a map. And now we take that system and we deploy it as a service, and that's what we do.
Yeah, it's super exciting to be involved with both of the companies, and what really continues to stand out to us at Tempus is that that laser-guided focus on delivering to the customer needs and not being sidetracked on shiny things on the side of the road that the company might want to do that look interesting but ultimately don't add true utility and value. And also the challenge that both of these companies have faced in executing to a very specific niche market opportunity at the start in order to validate what they wanted to do for a much, much bigger, broader market. And, when we looked at Swoop, we thought, okay, well, if this company can replace the majority of the Hyundai i30s carrying pharmaceuticals around in an esky in their back seat, well, that'd be a great opportunity. But then if it can extend itself into emerging markets and carry pharmaceuticals and vaccines across waterways and over impenetrable landmass, then that would be really quite powerful for governments and healthcare more broadly. And with Healthmatch, we found that the extent of the complexity in trying to understand the data sets required to match somebody to a clinical trial, and then also the sclerotic nature of the existing companies that were acquiring people for these clinical trials, and how even after sort of 30 or 40 years of operating, they were still only 20% successful, which seemed like a sort of an unbelievably poor hit rate in terms of mature businesses. So we've been excited from day one, with both of these companies, and we remain really excited. So perhaps could both of you provide some observation over the last couple of months. And one of the things that we've noticed is that the best companies and founders thrive in the most difficult times. And it's been really inspiring to see both Manuri and Eric face COVID head on and make some tactical decisions. But perhaps can you tease some of that out? Manuri, you're offering patient recruitment for researchers to help them find a cure. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess for us, it was really assessing what was happening around us. All the pharmaceutical companies and biotechs that we were working with naturally were on the front lines of trying to find a vaccine or develop diagnostic tests for COVID. So as soon as that started happening in March, we thought, look, how can we also be offering our support to our partners in the industry through this time? And so, there was a twofold approach to this. I think, first week of March, we decided to work from home. And then on that Friday, had the idea of, hey, look, there's all these clinical trials happening globally, and there are a lot of drugs being tested, but how do we, how do people actually find out about this? And even researchers, how do you know what's happening globally so you can collaborate? So I think over the weekend, our devs pumped out the Global Clinical Trial Tracker, which is, tracks clinical trials happening around the world for COVID. I think we've got over 1,300 trials that are happening currently and 42 million participants that they're after for these trials. So it's been really interesting and exciting to see that grow. And the other side of it was, how can we actually help in the COVID scenario to be able to assist in the clinical trials specific to this? And we did a call out to any participants either who've had COVID or who are healthy and want to help with clinical trials. And we were able to, I think on the first day of launch, we registered over 500 participants that wanted to help in these clinical trials, and we've been able to push them through to trials that are happening in Perth, Melbourne and Brisbane in the context of COVID. And so that's been really interesting, adapting sort of our technology from just more broadly clinical trials for different condition areas, and then being able to move specifically to this. I think, it's been really interesting for us to see like the importance now more than ever of technology in this space and being able to run digital clinical trials and do screening outside of the hospital setting, particularly because a lot of these clinics and hospitals that are running trials have had to pause bringing in patients physically to do screening. So yeah, that's been a really interesting time, and we've been able to sort of adapt and move to that new climate around COVID.
And you've also been growing the business at the same time, which must be tough given your entire team's remote and you're going through hiring processes. How have you found that team building exercise?
Yeah, that's definitely been an interesting one. I think we've got 3 or 4 new hires that haven't met the team in real life, so they've just only been over Zoom and Hangouts. But yeah, it's been interesting. We've had to really change like how we continue to build culture and keep like that team sort of like mentality and approach alive. And we do that through just all hands and Friday drinks virtually and things like that. But look, everyone's been, I think, we like you guys as well have a few introverts in the team that are enjoying, having that focus time. But I think everyone's definitely looking forward to heading back to the office, hopefully soon.
Yeah, it's a great culture internally. Eric, could you talk a bit more about the work that you've done in Africa with the company's partner with the Gates Foundation, a number of NGOs, number of governments, and maybe talk to us about how you supported their healthcare systems pre and post COVID, and potentially give us a window on the world of what Australia could do in order to facilitate this battle with this disease that we've got that may still be underlying in the greater population.
Yeah, definitely. So our operations at the moment in Africa are focused on 3 different countries. So we launched in the Democratic Republic of the Congo in July last year. That was under a program with Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, and the Gates Foundation, and an NGO called Village Reach. And it was predominantly focused on moving vaccines under cold chain conditions from the central storage location out to villages to push that vaccination rate up from 70 to 80%, or like as low as 40% in some areas, to the 98% needed for herd immunity. And very quickly, during the initial phase of that, it became very obvious that you can carry much more than vaccines on the aircraft. And in fact, by the 3rd day, we're bringing samples back for testing. And then fast forward to our operation in northern Malawi and then southern Malawi, they both predominantly focused around bringing pathology samples back and testing samples back, and then moving products out at the same time. And so if we zoom into southern Malawi, where we've got a large operation that covers about 600,000 or 700,000 people, and the healthcare system that supports them, we were doing a lot of routine flight operations carrying vaccines and then medical supplies out, and then picking up TB samples, which are kind of TB spectrum samples and blood samples, and bringing them back to the hospital for testing. As COVID kicked off, we had to make a really tough decision to bring the Australian team back. The Australian government's do not travel warning effectively cancelled all our travel insurance. So we had to bring the Australian team that was on the ground, back home. And that forced us to do something that we'd been preparing for a long time, which was to leave an operation running with our local workforce. So we have 4 fantastic Malawian team members that live in the southern part of Malawi, and we left the system there running with them. And the aircraft themselves are now piloted from the central coast of New South Wales. That's where our 2 pilots live. They're working from home just like everyone else. They've got a Microsoft Surface Pro with a touchscreen and a little box that connects them to a satellite, and they control the drones in Malawi from there. And what it meant when COVID kicked off, we immediately saw a doubling of the utilization of the aircraft in Malawi. And we saw a tripling in the variety of products that we're carrying. So to the point of which we're actually increasing the fleet size, we're doubling it, in fact, to cope with increased demand. As movement between these communities and the towns in Malawi is stopped to prevent the spread of COVID, the need to transport medical supplies and our ability to fly stuff in on demand, disinfect the aircraft, or fly it back, disinfect the aircraft and go again, 20 or 30 times a day becomes extraordinarily valuable. And if you take that context and bring it around to Australia, that's what we can see, that this technology is very, very useful for. It's the ability to move products quickly without that risk of having a car doing a loop that's going to potentially spread a communicable disease between a whole lot of different towns or a whole lot of different communities, or in a city, a whole lot of different suburbs. And what we're, and that the real value of the system is that day to day, it can have extraordinarily value in the supply chain, but in a pandemic or in a situation like this that, potentially we're going to see again as the world continues to globalize, or COVID's going to continue on for a long period of time, the value of this ability to move product on demand by the air is 100x or 1,000x anything else that's available.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that, we have people driving around in cars, going to clinics and hospitals, pulling the same piece of kit out of that car or van and depositing into a ward or a clinical research facility, and then taking it back out and then taking it onto the next hospital or the next facility is mind-boggling when you think about the inefficiency and also the risk. And I think it's fair to say that the work that you've done in Africa has been dealing with diseases that make COVID look tame. How did you think about the processes when you were rolling out across Africa that would keep people safe and ensure that these drones, when they flew to their next destination, they could, effectively deliver or pick up the whether it's the pathology or whether it's the drugs, and then do that in a way that's safe?
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of right. I tell people that our office in both of the district hospitals we operate of in Malawi is in the TB ward. And in fact, TB is a highly infectious and very, very dangerous disease that we don't have to deal with predominantly in Australia because most people are vaccinated, but that's not the case everywhere in the world. And so from day one, we're aware that as soon as we're carrying samples, there's a risk of infection from the aircraft itself. And most of these samples that we're carrying are focused on HIV or TB, but also the measles is quite prevalent. And these are all diseases that are not controlled in certain parts of the world. So when COVID came around, we kind of had an initial think about, okay, what are all the processes we're putting in place? How are we making sure that the aircraft's disinfected, and kind of step back. And what really came to the forefront was that actually the operation that we're deploying in the field is really safe, and what we needed to focus on was our, what we're doing at head office level, really. Disinfecting the aircraft, use of PPE, not reusing containers was all standard in the field already. And so it was only a small leap to be able to start operating very efficiently in COVID lockdown period.
And maybe just changing gears, just coming back to Manuri, over the last couple of months, we've seen some interesting dynamics in the clinical trial market. Does that start to inform you about how you think the world will consider healthcare and drug discovery in the coming 12 to 18 months, and then also beyond that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, if we look at drug discovery and clinical trials now, like as I mentioned, it's been so well contextualized for everyone. The anxieties that people feel around finding a vaccine are the same that patients with conditions feel on a day-to-day basis when there isn't a treatment. And I think there are three real main themes that have been accelerated and come to light through this process, but also over the last couple of years, and that's patient empowerment. So in healthcare, putting the patient at the center of whether it's drug discovery and clinical trials or healthcare in general. Real world data. So a lot of decisions in the context of clinical trials haven't necessarily been driven through real world data. They've been either clinicians or scientists sort of making bets and assumptions off anecdotal data that they have. So being able to actually have real world data on patients and drive a drug discovery process or a clinical trial process accurately and efficiently. And then, technology is having a huge impact. Being able to run digital clinical trials, do screening processes is a massive improvement to the inefficiencies that currently exist. And I think it goes both up and downstream in that clinical trial process, from drug discovery and finding molecules that we previously wouldn't have found, to being able to then get that drug and molecule through to the market as effectively as possible. So there's a lot of changes, and I think the great thing is the industry is really leaning in and wanting to utilize technology now, and they've seen the benefits of having technology drive these decisions and drive recruitment as well.
Well, one of the things that really stood out to us when we were thinking about both companies was that whilst they're very different businesses, one has effectively an autonomous flying robot product, and the other one is an AI drug discovery or clinical trial matching product, is that both of them increase the velocity of the solution in both of their respective markets. I think that's the power of technology when you match it to a great founder, is that they see the problem, they see the opportunity, and then they actually deliver on the promise of the opportunity and the solution in a way that rapidly accelerates the market and that solution in the market that they're operating. And the idea that from North Coast of New South Wales, a drone can be flown in Malawi to deliver a testing kit or deliver a piece of pathology, between two clinics is quite extraordinary, when it probably took a fixed wing aircraft or a helicopter to do that previously, and that was sub-economic. And then conversely, for Healthmatch sitting in Sydney to be able to match people, all around the world to drug trials, and to do that with effectively no bodies, no people required to do that, which is currently what happens, is kind of evidence of the power of technology when you deploy it accurately and with a lot of focus. Can we talk about the long-term vision that you both see in your markets? Manuri, clearly the world's now acutely aware of the importance of drug trials, and we all, none of us remember the polio epidemics. None of us really in Australia have had any experience with TB, as Eric said. So most of us have not been in an environment where we really needed a vaccine to be created to solve a problem. But we're now in that environment now. How is clinical trials going to change over time? Let's sort of think about the next 10 years, and how is patient matching going to evolve over the next 10 years with the power of AI?
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting when you look at COVID, for example. We're talking about vaccines potentially being able to be delivered in the next 12 months, and that's actually quite incredible for the timeline of a vaccine to be developed and go through the clinical trial process. But it also shows that there are a whole bunch of inefficiencies that can be solved if people focus on the solutions around that. And that starts from the inefficiencies that exist in screening and matching patients, and all the way to actually the operational components of running a clinical trial and digitalizing that. So I think with healthcare in general and electronic health records, as well as just utilizing like the patient and the technology together, I see clinical trials really transforming like how efficiently that they're run. And we'll see a lot of digital clinical trials, no more pen and paper, writing down notes and collecting the data on how the study's going, so we can do things more in real time and make more informed decisions quicker and more effectively. So yeah, I think it won't even take 10 years for us to really see the effect of this. The industry is already embracing it, and we're seeing patients more and more engaged about their healthcare. So with those two forces combined, I think we're only a couple of years away from seeing a dramatic shift in the way trials are actually run.
Do you think we have a permanent shift that's now occurred where governments have realised actually a lot of these communicable diseases can actually be solved if people focus on it, if you get the politics and governance, it's not governance, but regulation out of the way and make it a more effective process? Do you think that permanent step's been made through the last few months, or do you think that there's still a long way to go before we can accelerate drug discovery?
Look, I think there are components of that definitely over the last couple of months will be improved. And then there are other components that need more of a push from a technology side of things to be able to see acceleration. So, things like ethics approvals and committees that currently exist, there are ways in which we can make that more efficient. And I think people are, the good news is people are way more open to this and actually trying to solve the inefficiencies.
Yeah, right. And Eric, we talked about Swoop being no stranger to infectious diseases. Tell us perhaps how this pandemic has changed thinking at all levels around the speed in which you can react to the delivery of healthcare globally, and whether you're seeing a lot of movement at the NGO or I want to say the sort of Gates Foundation level that's starting to push down on government and regional governments in order to facilitate better healthcare with communities.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's this really interesting problem, and a question that's often asked of me is why we started operating in Africa, and people assume it's because it's easier to get aviation approvals, but that's actually not correct. The reason we started operating in the emerging world is that they've basically got a health crisis every day. And whether it's, TB or the measles that I spoke about, or HIV or Ebola in the DR Congo where we operate, they've got these challenges and they're already looking to technology to find solutions for them. So we're operating in countries where telehealth they're running telehealth trials, and there's only a pharmaceutical benefit scheme or only a Medicare rate for a telehealth consult that got made in the last couple of months as a result of COVID-19. So where parts of the world have been trying to adopt technology to strengthen their health system for a long time, I think what COVID is going to be is a catalyst to accelerate some of that technology adoption. And then I know what we're seeing at a very broad level, whether we're talking to the NGOs or we're talking to the Gates Foundation or we're talking to governments in Australia, is this awareness, that in some parts of the world it was already there, and awareness in other parts of the world that now it's coming up, that we have to invest in the healthcare system for the long term to be able to cope with this kind of stuff. And so I think a lot of, the work we do is around supply chain strengthening in healthcare. And that's exactly what we do. We're able to make the healthcare more agile and more responsive than it's otherwise been. And I think for a proven system, and there's some technologies that are not proven, and now our system is up and it works. It's proven to work across multiple countries, and there's a real opportunity now to be able to rapidly start implementing that into supply chains, not only to help the tail end of the COVID response, but then be ready for the next global event that occurs. And it might be a pandemic, or it might be a measles outbreak in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. But organizations broadly are becoming aware that they have to make that investment now into innovation and technology generally that is going to be able to support that system when it's needed.
We saw a measles outbreak in Samoa probably 6 months ago that basically shut the country down as they tried to contain it and stop it killing children. So these things explode quickly. We've got some questions coming through, which I think Ian's going to moderate some of that for our founders.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So first one's for you, Al. So anyway, thank you, everyone. That's been fascinating so far. Lot that I've learned. This one came in from Ranjit Al, and I guess it's a question around the outlook for healthcare investment. So Al, do you expect, or has there been a higher allocation of VC investments into healthcare in Australia?
I don't think we've got enough data at the moment to indicate whether healthcare investment or health tech investments actually gone up in this period. I know that a lot of telehealth solutions that really hadn't shown a lot of validation prior to COVID suddenly got a 10, 20, 50-fold increases in their activity rates, and that's certainly forced some investors to either double down on those companies because they've now got product market fit or not. But I think it's going to take a little bit of time for those founders who have been trying to build health tech companies to really come out of the woodwork. And if this has brought on a stream of investment going into that, then I think that's fantastic. The one challenge I think we've got is that there are not many outside of life sciences. There are not many investors in the country who have experience thinking far enough ahead on health tech to invest in opportunities that have a global a global remit. And so I think we've made 2 investments. We've just made another investment yesterday actually in a health tech company that has a global remit. So I think it would be also great to have more VCs leaning into the space as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's, is it your third?
That
one
was
today?
third. Yeah.
Out of a portfolio of how many?
14.
All right. So, I mean, that's becoming statistically significant, but I don't think there's any other VC with that sort of quarter-ish of the portfolio in healthcare.
Well, Airtree's made investments, SquarePeg's made investments, Blackbird's made some more sort of deep tech related investments. But it's not enough as a base of investors in a market the size of our country, and with the talent that we've got in the founder base, it's not enough at the moment.
Okay, let's keep moving on. This question is for you, Manuri, but Bendia Bijo has asked 2 questions, in fact, so I'll maybe put them both to you, and Eric, you can jump in with the second one. So the first one to you, Manuri, what are the gaps in the market for supporting health sector startups? And I guess around that, do you have any specific challenges? And it's a more general question for both of you, just about how to launch your startup. I mean, it sounds like Bendia's got an idea, but is just maybe a little cautious or nervous about stepping off the edge to launch your new business. So what advice have you got for new entrepreneurs who've got an idea but don't know how to take it? So yeah, but the first one, Manuri, what are we doing? What could we do better to support health sector startups here?
Yeah, I think similar to what Al said, I think the health tech sector's had, life sciences investors for a long time, particularly in Australia, but there haven't necessarily been investors that have been super deep in health tech as a space. And I think that's definitely changing, and more we're seeing not only interest, but people who have an understanding around the space and the technology and data side of things. So I think the more investments that are made in this space, the deeper the understanding will be from an investor perspective into health tech. We see a lot, like in the US, there's a whole category around that, and understanding digital technologies and how it interacts with hospital systems, EMRs, like a whole bunch of, whether it's telehealth, a whole bunch of sort of digital health plays. So I think that's one way of, really improving the space, is having more investments in this space and more investors that actually, through their portfolio companies or through their past experience, have understanding of the space. And then, if Eric wants to jump in, but my sort of advice to starting taking your idea in and then turning it into something is really like test it out with your customers and the people that you're designing it for, and then speak to as many people as you can within the startup ecosystem, particularly founders and other people that have taken that leap, whether it's building your MVP or raising your first round of capital. The more people with experience that you can surround yourself with, the more you'll avoid pitfalls along the way. So yeah, that's my advice.
Eric, do you want to jump in on that one? Like, what was going through your head when you decided to launch your business? Because it's not a rational decision, is it?
I definitely think it's a big leap to take, and I'm just going to echo Manuri's comments here. I think 100% the best thing you can do is build that deep knowledge of the problem you're trying to solve, and get out there and actually talk to people who you think have the problem to validate that and understand it really early on. And you can do that while you're still working in your current job or you're doing something else. And then one thing you do have to do is you do have to take the leap as well. So I think when you take the leap and you're like, oh, I'm going to work on this full time and start pushing out towards my MVP, that's when you become really committed to the problem. And then surrounding yourself with a group of people and talking to as many people as you can is really, really important. So, don't be, if you're going to get feedback you don't like, definitely you're going to get it from potential customers. You're going to get it from people in the that surround you, people in the startup ecosystem, other founders. But whether you do or don't like it, or whether it's positive or negative, that's all really valuable for you. And you just kind of learn to soak that all in and learn by osmosis from it. And that's how you're going to kind of get yourself over that first hurdle and get yourself on the way to building a successful company.
Yeah. One of the things that really stood out to us was that when we were talking to both Eric and Josh and Manuri about investing in their companies, we always felt like we were being sucked dry of information, both around how we were going to make an investment, the broader market, and what's sort of quite evident when you work with both Manuri and Eric and Josh is that they are all systems-based thinkers. They're all deeply inquisitive, and that they will double down on learning as much as they can about the industry and about the decisions they're about to make before they make them. And that permeates because they're thinking like that permeates the businesses, and then the velocity of those businesses actually increases because everybody takes that approach as they start building out the product and then going to market and then trying to acquire customers. So that really stands out when you spend a bit of time with both of these founders.
All right, cool. We still have 10 minutes, so a few more questions. Plenty coming in, so thank you. Look, this is kind of a generic one. It is targeted at Manuri, but I'm sure you'll have some thoughts on it too. It's from an anonymous participant, and it's around the privacy. So maybe paraphrasing or reading some of it. Storing personal and health data. How challenging is it to manage the privacy and security and patient information with GDPR? There was some chatter around the COVID Safe app and the how and where and in what manner the data is being stored. So yeah, thoughts around this. Maybe start with you, Al, and then Manuri.
I'd actually flip it to Manuri because she's dealing with this, live on a daily basis, and we had to think about that a lot because we were asking some pretty sensitive questions of people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is probably the most important thing when building a company that's collecting, very sensitive and specific healthcare data on its users. So I think you kind of break it into twofold. One is like the consent piece and being able to let people know exactly what their data is being used for, and the other is the privacy and security piece. So, when we, prior to launching Healthmatch, we did an extensive review on like the best way to inform patients on how their data is going to be used. And for us, we did like the legalese, but we also did a breakdown for our users, which is, your data is going to be used to match you to clinical trials. So that's why you're providing us with this very specific information. Your de-identified aggregated data will be used for R&D within trials. So that's, helping pharma companies or biotechs decide, let's say you have Crohn's disease, where to potentially focus the next drug development or focus the next clinical trial. And then finally, that we wouldn't ever sell or market their data. And we made that very clear, and we made that call from day one. And then on the other side, it was, how do we ensure the security of this data? And that's implementing all the best practices that exist and that are out there, from encryption, de-identification, where we actually store the data. And for us, Australian data is stored in Australia and doesn't leave the country. And likewise, we're operating in Hong Kong and New Zealand, and we have specific places that we store that data. So it's incredibly important. And the US has its own version of healthcare data and how it's treated, which is like HIPAA and HIPAA compliance. Australia doesn't have a certification like HIPAA, but we do have guiding principles and gold standards that need to be followed. And that's what Healthmatch does. And it's probably the most critical thing to do as a health tech company, because your entire reputation and people's privacy are at stake if you don't put this as your number one priority.
Yeah.
And you just need to experience the sensitivity, the public sensitivity to moving to a digital healthcare record or an electronic healthcare record, as it was described here, was extremely high. You had whole families saying that they would never do it. And I think that, in particular around healthcare, privacy is important. And when the internet, really accelerated, what we saw is that people couldn't believe that they were getting, services and products and being able to read content and do that for free. And the trade-off that we all realize later on, or the public, more broadly realize later on, is that they were receiving it for free, and the exchange for that was that they could be targeted, and that data was going to be collected. And I think that there's been a quantum shift away from the utilization of data for purposes other than what customers actually signed up for. And I think that that's going to continue, and founders who are alive to that and build product around that reality, I think, will have an opportunity to protect their brands over the longer term.
Yeah. All right, let's try and take a couple more before we're at time. So this is a nice generic broad question, so I'll throw to you and you can decide whether to answer it or throw it to the other guys. So it's from Patrick Sieb. What is your prediction for the future of the broader healthcare system?
Gee, that's broad.
Yeah.
Well, we are in the world of electronic medical records, and that will open up, the facilitation of treatment. It will help the industry as a whole start to track its own activities, and I think that that's something that has been really difficult to do. We are seeing a new wave of drug discovery. A lot of it will still have to go through clinical trials, and in particular, as drug discovery becomes more accurate and more focused on specific conditions and specific people, and individuals, the volume of trials will have to go up. So the bottlenecks within trials are going to have to be resolved, and that might have changed given how quickly governments have been able to react now. But more broadly, technology is going to have to play a part to create, deep efficiencies within healthcare. the global population is growing, and we're only going to experience more of these sorts of issues.
I should pick on one of the others. Eric, do you want to touch on this? I mean, like you've been exposed to, sort of healthcare systems to an extent around the world. I mean, like, what's your observation? Are things going to change as a result of this pandemic?
As I kind of said before, I think we're going to see continued investment into technologies that increase the resilience of the healthcare system generally. Digital health is obviously going to be a big one, particularly with digital record keeping. And I think on a global level, this will encourage leapfrogging for countries that don't have the strength of the system that Australia has. They're going to be incentivized now to make big investments into the future technologies that are going to enable them to, avoid stepping through the incremental process that most of the developed world has gone through to get to a strong healthcare system, and kind of leapfrog their way into it. And a lot of that's going to be achieved with technology. And they're very aware of that, which is exciting.
Yeah. All right, let's maybe take one more before we call it. So this is from Mark Domkins. Hey, Mark. And it's actually for both of you, Eric and Manuri. So, and it's the concept around, you both got deep domain knowledge, which you needed to start your businesses. And it's been critical for success. But as a founder, you need a panoply of skills, which you probably didn't have when you started, but you're now discovering. It's remarkable when you're a founder, the amount you don't know, or you don't know. So do you want to touch on that in your personal journey and what you think you've still got to grow into? So yeah, maybe start with Manuri and then finish with Eric.
Yeah, that's very true about you don't know what you don't know. I guess for me, coming from a medical background, I've only, prior to Healthmatch, only really been exposed to clinical medicine. And it's been the last 2 to 3 years has been a huge shift in my learnings and experiences. And for me, I'm still, every time we hire more people, the company looks very different. And so as a founder and as a CEO, I'm learning how my role changes, how to grow teams, how to manage people, and how to go from wearing, 100 different hats to narrowing down those hats that I end up wearing. And so, super steep learning curve, but I guess, I think one thing that helps is having an appetite to learn and adapt and sort of take in information from those around you and your experiences, and try and, learn as quickly as you can. And yes, you can make mistakes, but it's been really, really interesting. And managing people and growing teams has been definitely one of those experiences that I don't think you could really be taught.
That's definitely a common theme we hear. Eric, do you want to jump on that one?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really interesting how the journey kind of progresses from, what is inevitably 2 people in a living room or 2 people in the garage or whatever it happens to be, into a full-blown company. And I think the biggest lesson is that if you haven't done it before, you've just got to be very willing to talk to and be very vulnerable in front of a large group of people and learn from them, and admit to yourself that you don't know everything, which can be hard because you need this bullish drive to build something that people say is impossible. Whether any type of startup, you'll have lots of naysayers, and you've got to have this bullish drive to go and grab it, but you've got to also balance that with this willingness to learn and build knowledge from the people that you surround yourselves with. And so, there's great ecosystems that enable you to do that. And, groups you can be involved with that are willing to share that knowledge with the people around them, which is really beneficial.
Yeah.
From my perspective, the growth phase, I think, for me, I was intimately involved with the product and the customer up until now, and we're kind of pushing towards 30 people in the full circle of Swoop, and that your role as a CEO starts to change. And the things that I really enjoyed about being deeply involved with the product and the operation, you start to step back from, and it's about learning to step back and release the reins to the team, because you will, building a company like this, you'll surround yourselves with incredibly talented people. And that's what Josh and I have done. We talk about it all the time. we can't believe that we've got these people around us. And as the company's growing, you've basically got to let your little baby go into the world and start to grow on its own. I think that's a challenge for me moving ahead.
All right, we're just about time. So Al, have you got a final comment?
Yeah, I think, the one thing that founders and investors need to understand is that, great founders don't stop during difficult times. The customers still have needs during those periods. And if you can find a valuable niche that gives you the mobility to reach a really big goal, then you should step forward and start that company, invest in that company, because it's the companies that have really big visions and hack their way into the solution and are great learners that ultimately have the best chance of success.
Yeah.
And that's what we try and find.
All right. And maybe I know we are over time officially, but what we've discovered at Innovation Bay is the power of bringing founders together. We've got this club called Summit Club for Series A and beyond founders, and we've been running it for a year. The benefit of founders talking to other founders and sharing their challenges is unbelievable. So find other founders, and look, and we're going to have some initiatives around that coming up as well, which we're excited to share with you. Look, we are at time, so thank you, Manuri, Eric, and Al. Really appreciate that. So take care, and we'll see you on the other side. I'm just going to switch back to our slides here while we do that. So coming up tomorrow, we have our regular Innovation Bay with AWS. We've got Toby Skovron, who's the CEO of co-working space Creative Cubes. It's a pretty tough industry. It's been impacted by COVID-19. So Rachel Newman from AWS is going to be asking about the future of co-working and how they've adapted during the lockdown. We are also doing another panel next week with a topic that many of you have been asking about, which is what is happening with angel and early stage investment. I think even before this, there was a general perception that there was a sort of crunch coming in that seed stage investment world. The impact is material. So we're going to talk about that. We've got a fantastic panel. Again, I'm handing over the mic to Alan, the real Alan Jones. Now the other one has retired. So the nice Alan Jones is going to be on the mic. And maybe stepping into to this situation. So that should be really good. Really excited about that. Anything else that you as the audience want to hear about, please add your suggestions. We've got a survey that will come to you at the end. So we do a podcast, which you may have heard of, called Open the Pod Bay Doors. So Faden's been doing some fantastic interviewing. So Jeremy Liu from Lightspeed Venture Partners has just come out. So unbelievable track record. And Jamie Bott, who is the sort of HR expert at Sequoia, has also been on the show. So there's a couple of really good episodes out there. Plus, we're doing a news special, which Al has been part of a couple of weeks ago. So we're doing that again on Monday. I mentioned this at the start, but please do take this Startup Navigate survey, bit.ly/Startup Navigate. Thank you again to our fantastic, wonderful sponsors, Macquarie, KPMG, AWS, and Farmark Ventures. That is it for this morning. I'm sorry we're slightly over, but once again, thank you, Al, Manuri, Eric. Thanks to everyone for coming. I've been your host, Ian. Well, no, I haven't been your host, Ian Gardner. I've been Ian Gardner. Al's been your host this morning, but Innovation Bay is here to support you. Stay safe, stay strong, stay inside for now, kind of. And hope to see you all again soon.